all sorts of chipper about my new microphone, so let's see, maybe this will be helpful. So one of the things that we did on our test, guys and gals, was that we did not do very good at absolute value equations and solving compound inequalities. So I'm going to go ahead and go through a couple of those. We're going to practice these in class today, so watch this video. We'll do the practice. Man, I need a longer USB cord, that's for sure. It's hard to write on here, so let me see if I can do this. So you guys have this sheet in front of you. So let's go ahead and go over a couple and see if we can go ahead and get this squared away. The evaluate doesn't seem to be that hard, so let's just do a couple of those real quick. Well, maybe just do one and then we'll move down to the actual solving them. So let's go ahead and evaluate number 1. So 5W, and W is 0.4. So everywhere I see a W, I'm going to put in that 0.4. Now, absolute values count as parentheses in order of operations. So if I had multiple things happening, I would be doing the absolute value first. And I'm not going to do anything with the absolute value until I only have one number in here. So if I do 5 times 0.4, I get 2. And the absolute value of 2, or the distance from 0, is 2. Okay. So then let's come down here to solving equations. And this is really where we struggled when we were on our test. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at, let's look at number 13. And we will do this one together. So I chose this one because there's nothing outside the absolute value bars. And by something outside the absolute value bars, what I mean is something like, say, number 20 where there's a 2 out there, or number 22 where there's a 4 and a -1 out there. If you have stuff out here, you have to move it first before you can deal with the absolute value bars. So this one, that's already been taken care of. So we don't have to really do as much here. So when you're solving an equation, man, I still really need a longer USB cord. That would be awesome, but I don't have one yet, so just bear with me, I'll get one. So the way you undo, so if I asked you if you were squaring a number, how you would undo that, you would tell me square root. If I asked you if you're adding a number, how you undo that, you would tell me you subtract. So we are doing absolute values, and so my question is, how do we undo absolute values? Very carefully, right? So remember, absolute values are distance from 0. So for example, if I had the absolute value of 3 or -3, they are both a distance of 3 units away from 0. If I drew this on a number line, it doesn't matter that one is positive and one is negative. They are both 3 units away from 0. So 3 can be the answer for 2 different distances, right? So this thought process is really how we undo the absolute values. We have to split it into 2 equations because this could come out to be a -2, which would give me a 2, and this could come out to be a +2, which would give me a 2. So the very first thing I do is the very first equation, and that is literally writing what I have, but I just drop the absolute value bars. Okay? The second equation that I write down is exactly what I have inside the absolute values. But remember, this could have come from a -2 also, so I take that into account. Now I'm going to solve. So how do I undo a +3? I subtract 3, so I get y equals a -1. And how do I undo a +3? I subtract 3. And I get a -5. So answers that work here are either a -1 or a -5, which should make sense. A -1 plus 3 is 2. The absolute value of 2 is 2. A -5 plus 3 is a -2. The absolute value of 2 is 2. So those would both be my answers for number 1. So go ahead and see if you can do Number, ooh, I didn't really give any other options for that, did I? Go ahead and see if you can go ahead and do 17, but realize that 17 could be written out as 1 minus c equals 10. That'll make it the same as example 13. Okay, so now that we've gotten that taken care of, let's look at one that has some things outside of the absolute values. So let's look at one where we have a multiplication. Remember, with absolute values, you cannot distribute in, okay? So what you need to do is you need to solve for your absolute value first. So how do I undo that too? Well, it's multiplication. So to undo multiplication, we divide. That's the first step, okay? So really what we have is the absolute value of 3w equals 6. And now you're back exactly to what we did on example 13. Split it into two equations. 3w equals 6. I'm sorry, I said three equations. I meant two. I was already reading the three. 3w equals 6, and your second equation is 3w equals negative 6. And all you have to do is solve, okay? So let's see. Go ahead and try number 25. 25 is exactly the same thing as number 2. You will have to divide first to get that answer. Okay? Last but not least, let's go ahead and look at one where we actually have to move something over to the other side. So by addition or subtraction, we just did multiplication. So let's actually look at 24. So 24, the thing that has to move first is this plus 5 because it's outside the absolute values. So the opposite of plus is minus. So we go ahead and subtract 5. And that gives me 8d minus 4d equals, what is 13 minus 5? It's not as fun when you guys aren't here because I can't really um, ask anybody. But let's see. Pretty sure that's 8. Pretty good at math there. So once I have everything on one side and I just have the absolute values, I should do like terms too if I have anything in the absolute values. So what's 8d minus 4d? And again, I don't have you guys here, bummer, right? So 4d equals 8. And notice this again is the same thing that we did back here on example 13. Split this into two equations and go ahead and solve for D. Okay, so why don't you go ahead and try example number 21. Now that we're done with the 1.4, and if you haven't started the worksheet yet, you should go ahead and finish that up for either classwork or homework. But the other thing we struggled with was solving inequalities, at least compound inequalities. So let's go ahead and remind ourselves how to do those. So let's look at number 1. Number 1 is just like if we had an equals sign, guys. And most of you are probably going to tell me to distribute this in, even though some of you would say we should divide first. I would totally divide first, but knowing you guys, most of you are going to distribute in first, so that's what we're going to do. So 7 times 7 is 49a minus 7 times 9 is 63. I'm going to bring down my inequality sign and the 84 that I haven't used. How do I move 63? Well, it's subtraction, so I'm going to add it. So I'm going to have to come over here, guys, so I have space, but I have 49a is less than or equal to, and I have 84 plus 63, so what is that? That's a 7. Let's see, 12, 13, 14, so 147. And now I'm going to divide by 49 because I'm multiplying here. Do I need to change my inequality sign? Well, I am dividing to solve. And so the answer is no, because the 49 that I'm dividing by is positive. So my inequality sign is going to stay exactly the same. And 147 divided by 49, who knows what that is? Oh, guess what? Nobody's here to tell me. It's 3. Okay, and if I write this in set notation, guys, squiggly bracket A is less than or equal to 3, squiggly bracket. It's a closed dot at 3 because it has the equal to bar. And less than means I'm going to color left. Okay, so why don't you guys go ahead and try number 3. Okay, whatever you guys don't finish is classwork and or homework if we don't finish all of it. And then I obviously will come around and check for questions. Homework if we don't finish all of it. And then I obviously